Mr Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Tasmanian Greens, I send my love and compassion to all the people who have suffered because of the mass murder that took place in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday, where we know at least 253 people lost their life. Many hundreds more are physically suffering, and of course many thousands of people are immediately affected as families and friends. This is an incredible toll on a small island, an island which we share as Tasmania, an island, the pain of our own experience 22 years ago of the shock of a mass murder. And we know as an island in Tasmania that we are experiencing the repercussions of that still. It's not long ago in our past. People live with the loss of people that they loved in Port Arthur. They live with the physical wounds, they live with the mental trauma, and we have an experience with these three islands, Sri Lanka, New Zealand, Tasmania, and the terrible harm that's being caused by people, mass murders that are being perpetrated, faith against faith, person against person, terrorism, hatred, division, they all come from the same source, which is not bringing people together, not understanding that we have a common humanity. I want to just mention the words of Ron Franks, the CEO of the Multicultural Council of Tasmania, and he wrote a letter to members and made it a really important point that the failure to recognise that violence against another human being is an attack on life itself represents our failure to identify with each living human being on the planet, irrespective of religion or race. These are not just attacks on religion. They're attacks against you, me, and every other person who shares planet Earth. We're all in this together. We all have a role to play and cannot extricate ourselves from these tragic events. A failure to do so is a failure to engage and empower every living person against the mantra of hate and violence. Mr Deputy Speaker, I think we need to acknowledge that the date of this mass murder, this orchestrated mass murder which occurred across 3 churches and 3 hotels and other parts of Sri Lanka were organised to occur on Easter Sunday, which is one of the most festive events in the Christian year. It commemorates the resurrection from death of Jesus Christ. It's the most important and celebration, and it's one that is celebrated with great joy. And so it is a particularly cruel form, a cruel choice of day, on a joyous celebration for a community of people who come together in spiritual community, in love, to choose that as a date to perpetrate such violence against other people. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, this has been, it is, words do fail all of us in this situation, but it is really the things which have stood out, and there are so many stories. 253 people cannot possibly capture the trauma that has spread, rippled across Sri Lanka and of course to Tasmania. On behalf of the Greens, I'd like to extend my sympathy and compassion and thoughts to the Sri Lankan community in Tasmania. They are a much loved part of our island community. We value so much the energy and liveliness of the Sri Lankan people. I've never met a Sri Lankan person who hasn't been a bubbly, joyous, open, friendly person. They have a particular community which is very special. And, I think those of us who were available or able to attend the commemoration after the Christchurch shootings, which was here in Hobart, were struck by the number of communities that came together to support the Muslim people in Tasmania. And, here we are today coming together to support the Christian people of Sri Lanka, the Christian people in Tasmania. And what does this say to us, Mr. Deputy Speaker? That we are all the same, that we must stop the division and the words that has established a world where these sorts of acts of terror can occur. We can change this. And I know that every single person in this Parliament, I'm utterly confident, will work towards changing that culture of division and hatred, which unfortunately feels as though it's overwhelming. But we know that good people win through. And I want to finish, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by mentioning some of the best of people that came out in the worst of situations. The story of Leslie Apuami, 59, who lost his sister, a niece and a brother-in-law. His memory, of course, is clouded by the things he saw in the church, but that isn't all he remembers from the blast that occurs. What he remembers, he said, was how, like in the other churches, we teamed together, worked together to rush people out after the explosion. He's an electrical engineer, and he was back again the next day to see if it could help start with repairs. He'd lost 3 members of his family. He said, "I only wish that what happened here is never repeated in any church, mosque or temple around the world." And Mr. Deputy Speaker, there was also Channa Regionji, who has been making candles all his life for St Sebastian's Church, and he lost his wife and 9-year-old daughter. He said, "I feel a deep sense of sorrow having buried my wife and daughter." But when the priest asked if he would like to come and help with the clean-up the next day, he said, "Well, what else am I going to do? There's no one else at home. I may as well be with my community." So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the Tasmanian Greens, I extend my respects and thoughts, love to the people of Sri Lanka, the people of Sri Lanka who live in Tasmania, to everyone who's been affected by this succession of mass murders. And we strongly believe that we need to have unity through faith and tolerance of faith, tolerance in all forms of belief, and love in a time of fear is what we all need to put first and foremost.